7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that everybody rise for the pledge of allegiance. Without our student reps, I'm going to ask Councilmember Summer Farrell to lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic. One nation.
Under God, indivisible.
Good evening, everyone.
Aldo, here. Griffin, here. Albert Saxon, Michaels,
Present.
Schlatt,
Here.
Debbie Farrow,
Here.
Keo.
Here,
2 student representatives are appointed as.
correct. Thank you. Item C on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from our city council work session on March 11th, as well as our city council meeting on March 13th.
I'm looking for the minutes.
Motion by Griffin, by Keating. Support. Second by Farrell, and Bill. Any questions or any comments? Please?
I had a few, on the bottom of page 1 under capacity study and Stone Kingsley development, in the second bullet, just as whether there's potential interest in the development, whether there is, I think it is missing. And then also that third bullet, installation of a temporary drive aisle to daycare, I didn't know what aisle was there.
Should be AISLE.
Okay, yeah. Page 4. The non-arranged participation, so this is under E. My recollection is that the residents spoke about the lawn blowers, not specifically the mowers. I don't know if anybody
Sure.
blowers, so I think the
Yeah.
mower should be switched to blower. And on page. The top of page 7, the third bullet. It says, Slav indicated that he was concerned about people driving off of the cement pad, period, environmental concerns, period. I don't know if that can just be made like a,
And
and yeah, like get rid of the period and make that a sentence or phrase or something. And under the last point at 4 on that same page, council members thank Josh for his work in making the previous arts, culture, and heritage committees efficiently. Did they do meeting? The previous meeting run efficiently,
This collection process.
or the selection process? That's some sort of a noun there.
the selection process for official.
Yeah, and then under 5, the first bullet, Michelle stated that he looked into, I think it should say into how the naming policy works in other local entities. I think a how is missing. And then on page 9, under my council comment, and I can submit this via email too, if that would be easier, but I would like to add, so I addressed, I mean, I think what's currently there is accurate, but I would also like to call it. Also mentioned trade-offs related to electric powered equipment / vehicles, including human rights concerns related to the mining of materials for batteries and increased fire risk associated with charging batteries. So, again, would you like me to say that or just?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do that. Those are all the comments.
Okay, Mr. Salvador, anything?
No.
Other council members? Okay. Please call the vote to approve the minutes.
Aldo,
Yes.
Schlatt.
Yeah.
Michaels,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Debbie Farrow,
Yes.
Keo.
Yes. Both sets of minutes are approved with changes. Thank you. We have Julia Roberts here this evening from Western Washington Area Value Express. Commonly known as WAVE. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you all, members of the council. Nice to see you again. It's been a year. I do want to thank you for appointing staff to our board as a new representative to the WAVE. Grace, our associate planner, will be being presented to our board in April for approval of the recommended. And with that, we go to the next slide, please. So just a quick overview of what we'll be going over today, a little bit about where we've been in the last year and some projects about where we're going, updates since the last time I saw you on projects that had started before and new ones that are coming up. So in October of 2022, our board approved new organizational values and goals for WAVE. We had, I think, had good values as an organization, but these are more making them explicit so that we can have something to lean on moving forward as we're planning ahead for the future. So these are our 5 goals that we've determined as an agency with input from staff and the board as well. First and foremost, service. So you already heard transit service, but we also provide customer service. And so kind of those 2 things hand in hand. We also provide connections. So both in terms of connecting people to where they need to go, but also how do we connect people to each other? So what are the relationships that we're building, the connections that we're making as a human services agency as well, that those are really important. Dignity. We work with a lot of older adults, people with disabilities, and the general public as a whole, and how we treat people is just as important as what we're doing and why. Most importantly, I think we want to make sure that this applies to not only our passengers and our broader community, but also our employees too. Joy. We try to bring a smile to everyone that we take on board our buses and our vans, but also, you know, everybody can have a tough day, and if we can make that just a little bit better, office or on board, we want to try and do that for each other. It just makes going to work or going about your day a more pleasant experience. Sustainability. We're talking about kind of the 3-legged stool, if you've heard of it, for sustainability, not just financial sustainability, but also environmental sustainability and social sustainability. So making sure that the type of service we're providing is best meeting the needs of the community, and that we're doing so in a way that is reducing emissions and reducing our footprint for the long term. And next slide, please. So our goals. This is meant to be something that can sort of stand the test of time, but especially for the next 3 to 5 years. We adopted a multi-year budget for the first time for this fiscal year, and that's helped us to kind of see ahead a little bit more, and also plan out not just what we're doing in 1 year, but what we're doing in the following years as well. So this is the start. This is kind of the big picture of where we hope to go. This is something our board has set. We'll be going out to the community for input on our strategies, or what we're calling our objectives. And then we'll be coming back with staff to develop the tactics. And for anybody who's a Game of Thrones, it kind of makes it easier to remember GOT, goals, objectives, and tactics. This is something that was taken from the 5 elements of the Healthy Nonprofit. So they're a national model that we determined we would use. So these categories are not something that we came up with on our own, but the actual goals themselves are something that we did develop in accordance with these groupings. So first and foremost, culture and management. We really want to evolve diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's something that I don't think it's been indirectly looked at. We want to look at it more directly in terms of what do we do going forward and making sure that that's present in everything that we do. In terms of our governance and boards, we want to be more policy focused. So making sure that our best practices, not only for small urban and rural transit communities, are at the forefront, but that we're trying to lead. Fundraising and financial management. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But we want to make sure that in addition to our multi-year budget, that we are able to fund the highest and best use of public transit services for the Dexter and broader communities. And this communications and relationships is a little bit new for us. We haven't had capacity as an organization to do as much community engagement historically, because we've been focused really operationally. And so over the past year, we've designed a new structure for our agency, and I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. And what that's allowing us to do is not just focus administratively, but also in terms of marketing to the community, who and what we are. We are often misperceived as only for older adults and people with disabilities, when in fact we're for everyone. We provide public transit for any individual who wants to get around in our community, regardless of age, race, ability, you name it. We want to make sure that we are clear about the way that we communicate that to people. So going forward, we're going to have more of an emphasis on that. We're working with DNB Marketing in Chelsea, and we now have a role that is half administrative, half marketing, that's our community relations coordinator, Kai Man. So you may see them out and about as we be more engaged with the community. And then finally, planning technology administration. So we've been doing some pilots. We did a 6-month app last year that's a more Lyft and Uber-like experience. We're going to be doing a more sustainable grant-funded application for not only dispatching, which we've done historically, but also for riders and drivers so that they can kind of track where their ride is coming from, who they have to pick up next, all of those good things. And then, you know, just making sure that whatever we're doing, we're reaching, you know, there's a balance in transit between coverage, how far you go, and frequency, how often you travel. Right now, our fixed routes travel about once every 2 hours between Chelsea, Dexter, and Ann Arbor connection with AATA services at the Myronzi Road. And then they travel about once every hour, double that frequency along the Jackson Road corridor between Baker Road and roughly Wagner. One of the things that we'd like to do is look at how are we not only focusing on equity, but also access for people going forward. And with that, you know, what does that mean for our environment, both in terms of kind of climate change, but also just generally, how are we creating a good impact for the community that we're in? Next slide, please. So this is the organizational structure change that I talked a little bit about. On the right, you'll see this is our internal organizational structure for staffing. There's myself, our new mobility services manager, which is a new role, John Wallace, who's overseeing operations. Kai Man, who's our community relations coordinator. And then so when I first came on board 3 years ago, I had 25 direct reports. This allows us to have more direct leadership and also support for our transit bus operators or our drivers. So we have 2 public transportation supervisors, a lead operations coordinator that helps with maintenance and support for the transportation supervisors, and dispatch has been incorporated into those public transit supervisor positions. We do have 1 vacant position that we're filling at the moment, so that is open, and we hope to have a full staff next month. And then our board of directors, for anyone who's maybe newer to the full Western Washington region that we support. In addition to the city of Dexter, we also service the city of Chelsea, the 6 surrounding townships, including Scioto, Webster, Dexter Township, Linden, Sylvan, and Lima. And then most recently, in the past couple of years, we worked with now Chelsea Hospital, formerly St. Joe's, and Trinity Health in partnership with Umesh Med has allowed us to provide service to Manchester Village as well as Stockbridge Village. So that is a 2.5-year pilot. We're looking to extend that through 5 Healthy Towns for another year now that we're kind of, you know, having had a few years of starting this during the pandemic. We really want to get a solid year under our belt if we can to evaluate this pilot, not during the pandemic, if at all possible. And so in addition to that, we have some other nonprofit agencies. The Chelsea Retirement Center, our community, is one of our long-term partners, as well as the Chelsea Senior Center. We've also worked with the Dexter Senior Center and other organizations, the Cedars of Dexter and many others. Our newest joining member is the Disability United, formerly known as the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living. And then we also are looking at the potential for, similar to the city of Dexter, looking at a more intergenerational approach based on board retreats in the past. So possibly adding youth membership on our board as well. Next slide, please. So this is actually a new diagram we're sharing with the community to help understand some of our financials and our ridership as a whole. I think there's some of the funding for public transit is complex. So this is the simplest way to explain it in terms of a lot of our grants. About a little over half of our funding is from federal and state grants. About 10% of our funding is from fares, or what people pay on board the buses if it's not a free ride. And then the remaining 35% roughly is in large part thanks to local municipalities, a few nonprofit funders, as well as some donations. And I think a lot of times people think, well, because we get federal and state funding, we don't need local funding anymore, or, you know, we can survive that, and we can't. We only get federal and state funding because of the local funding that we receive. So whether it's a dollar that someone pays on the bus or a dollar that's paid by the city of Dexter, that is matched a little over dollar for dollar by the federal and state government. So we're able to double the amount of service that we provide thanks to your support. We have had in the past 2 years some additional support during the pandemic from the CARES and TRISA funding acts. However, that was capped and then reduced for this fiscal year. So when we looked at our long range funding, you may have seen we asked for some additional funding. We've had, in addition to just general inflation, particularly maintenance, insurance and gas, as well as needing to have competitive wages and benefits to retain transit bus operators, which there are fewer if you're entering the workforce. As well. So one of the things that we're looking to do is by having a larger ask this year, and we haven't asked for additional funding in a few years. From what I understand, I've been here about 3 years. This is going to allow us to not have to ask for hopefully another, you know, chunk of change in the next few years, but more in an inflationary basis so that it's consistent. And this is also going to help us to maintain and continue the service that we're providing. In terms of ridership, we lost about, I think I mentioned this in my last year's presentation, about 50% of our ridership when we closed down for 3 months during the pandemic. Since then, we've recovered a little over 85% of our ridership. That has dipped a little in the winter due to seasonal changes. That's to be expected. But we are now at low, you know, have been at low levels of COVID for a few weeks. You know, that could change, but seasonal flus and everything aside, we still encourage people to wear face masks, but they are optional. We are anticipating that if this trend continues, that we will see a full recovery of ridership, possibly as soon as this year. And as you can see, we had more ridership in the last year than we did in the previous year. The purple line being this past fiscal year for us, on a federal fiscal year, October to September, and the green line being the year prior. I will say I have some specific numbers for Dexter as well. So most of our ridership for Dexter comes from our fixed route services, but we do have demand responsive services as well, or what's called door to door for the city of Dexter and the Dexter School District in this area. We've had 61 trips for Dexter on our Dexter door to door service, so about 2% of those trips. And then Lifeline, which is a non-emergency medical transportation service that allows people to go from anywhere within Western Washtenaw to anywhere in that. We've had 17 trips on that service, or 1.6%, and we've had 7,870 trips overall on our fixed route services. We can't determine at this time what percentage of that is attributed to the city of Dexter because we only know where people get on. We don't know necessarily where they get off. And so we're hoping to do a ridership survey with our new application later this year that will help allow us to look into unique riders and where people are going at an aggregated level so that it's protecting privacy as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of where we're going, in addition to, you know, hopefully regrowing our ridership, continuing to do that, we have a fully funded federal and state grant for an introduction to electric vehicles. This will include not only the funding for the vehicles themselves, which is one of our largest costs in addition to operating. Typically, a bus like this will go for, that would be electric, around, I want to say like $150,000 to $200,000. With the electric, it bumps it up to probably close to $300,000. And so it really helps to have that federal funding that we apply for to cover that cost, in addition to the charging infrastructure, as well as education for safety training and maintenance training. We are working with potentially a company called Optimal. They're located in Plymouth, Michigan. So not too far from us. The benefit to that is, you know, if we have anything we need to go talk with them about, they're actually practically in our backyard, regionally speaking. So it's really nice. They're the first low floor medium duty size bus. that's electric. And we actually did a demo ride at their facility. We'll be bringing those out to the community when the weather gets just a little bit warmer. And everyone can take a ride along, see how quiet it is. It's got really beautiful windows too, to boot. But most importantly, it's zero emissions tailpipe. There are, other forms of emissions. These are the ones that are currently being prioritized with federal funding. So it doesn't mean we have to stick with electric for forever. We will have to look into things like a backup generator in case of the storms that we saw. But for the most part, we're going to test it out on some of our smaller routes so that we can make sure that we're really only using about maybe half of what the maximum capacity is, so that we don't wear down the batteries too fast so they can be replaced, and so that we don't have to switch them out in the middle of a run during the day. Just in case, we have applied for both level 2 and level 3 chargers. Level 2 are what they call AC or slow chargers that you can charge overnight. We've also applied for level 3, which is fast chargers or DC chargers for rapid charge that we can charge during the day for a longer route, like our fixed route for the community connector service. And I'm happy to, I have some time for questions at the end if you have any. The next slide, please. We have a couple of other projects we're looking at. This one we started last year, but due to the shortages in chips and manufacturing for parts, we were not able to get a vehicle right away. We now have a prospective vehicle donated by the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, potentially coming through hopefully in the next month. And this will allow us to install mechanical arms on board the buses that come down and allow for automated wheelchair securements. So independent, push of a button for anyone with a mobility device, whether it's a wheelchair or a scooter. I was a pilot I did back when I worked at AATA. And one of the things is that it faces, as you can see in this picture, it's rear facing, which is supposed to be safer. If you think of flight attendants or children's seats in cars. But ADA does require that at least one option is forward facing. So we'll have both options, traditional securement and this automated securement. They're made by the same manufacturer. And what this allows us to do is see what works well for our community. We're one of 6 agencies in the state that were selected for this pilot project. And, if it's successful, then we can look at potentially installing them on buses in the future. Right now, it's only for larger 40-foot buses. So we'll be just testing it on 1 or 2 vehicles. But there's hopefully progression towards the ability to install it on smaller vehicles as well moving forward. And finally, these last 2 pieces are related to community engagement. As I mentioned, we're looking to engage with the community, not only around we have the why of WAVE's goals, but the what. What does that mean for the next 3 to 5 years specifically? What does the community want to see? And some scenario planning. Assuming that funding is able to reach the level to maintain our services, great. But do we need to do some temporary consolidations, or are we able to expand service and possibly grow it if there's increased demand? All of those things we'll be talking about with people starting at the Chelsea Expo on April 5th, 16th, and then ending with the Dexter Memorial Day Parade on May 29th, as well as visits to the farmers markets in between. So keep an eye out. We'll be sending out the news about where we'll be and when in the coming weeks. And we look forward to seeing everybody out and about. Last slide, please. Finally, in addition to kind of our 2 main areas of focus for community engagement, we're also looking at a little bit of potential rebranding. So I mentioned the perception that, maybe WAVE is only for people with disabilities and older adults, and all of that is, a third of our riders are older adults, a third of our riders are people with disabilities, a third of our riders are the other people in the general public as well. And so we really want to make that known. We're looking at a potential slogan of Rides for All and possibly a new logo. So we want to get some input from the community on, what people like, what people would like to see differently. And we think this is a really good visual way to engage with folks around, getting some buy-in and also just excitement around some of the things we're going to be doing ahead. So with that, happy to take any questions if you have them. That's that. Thanks. Yes.
So, on a normal day, how many buses are in operation at one time?
So we have a fleet of 15 buses, or 15 vehicles, 13 buses, 2 spare vans. During the week, we have about 10 buses during the peak periods. And on the weekend, it's about 6. We only operate fixed route on the weekends. So the community connector and our Chelsea community ride circulator downtown Chelsea.
Not the door to door.
Correct, but that's something we might want to look into in the future. Or evening service overnight, yes.
Just curious if you know within the city of Dexter what the busiest stops are, and I guess related to that, do you have any concerns about the safety or access to any of the stops?
So there's a stop right downtown across from Fillmore, thank you. There's a shelter at that location. So typically, and this shelter was put in before I joined WIC. Typically, shelters are put in when there's a lot of activity or it's a central hub. So that's our main stop for downtown Dexter. Our door-to-door services can go anywhere in Dexter, so there's not like a set spot. But we also have, as we're going in between the communities, there's the bushes. There is the market across the street. I think we'd like to do more engagement with the high schools because we do have stops at a couple of schools in our communities. And so that's one of the things we're going to be looking at going forward. In terms of safety, Wade has a very safe record. We really don't get a lot of complaints, which is really nice, but it also is something why we want to engage the community to make sure that we're hearing people. We, rarely if ever have accidents, and then when we do, it's typically, for example, because we're required to stop at a railroad track and somebody was looking at their phone and they, drove into the back of the vehicle, nobody was hurt, but, there's some damage to be repaired. If you looked at our goals and our values, actually safety was the number one when it came to service. We want to provide a safe and effective service for people. And so that is one of our number one priorities.
Yeah, and I guess my question was just if there's anything that the city can do to make any of their staff safer, if there are any concerns related to our staff.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can look at when we're doing, like, after we do community engagement, I'd like to hear from people what their perspectives are. Typically, the biggest issue with it's not maybe as much a safety issue as it is an access issue. So sometimes, if there aren't sidewalks connected to the bus stops or curb ramps, those can be put in. We're going to be doing an accessibility audit with the disability network coming up. And I think that will help us to answer that question a little bit more in detail.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we still doing, is it 17,000 and 17,000? Is that our contribution?
Yeah, so typically we divide it half between the contributions. There is a larger ask
Okay,
for this coming fiscal year.
what is that,
Let's see,
It
it
is.
was 37,000, up from 34.
So, okay, so no. I just want to. Well, when will we see those contracts? Or July?
So typically we see it around this time.
So 85,600, and so half and half is how we've done our grants or our contracts historically. That's paid out on a quarterly basis. We're asking our local partners for a 25% increase this year, which is larger than usual, in part because of the reasons that I explained about maintenance, insurance, gas, making sure that we can sustain those services going forward. Because our federal and state funding is pretty fixed, and if we increase fares, we risk losing passengers, we risk losing federal and state funding. We're relying on 35% of our local funding. We're also doing other grant applications. We're doing a donations fundraising campaign coming up. So we are not solely relying on our local partners.
I don't have any other questions. Anybody have any questions? Good. Thanks, very good report.
Thank you all.
Appreciate the work
Good
you
to
do.
see you.
Okay, we're down to non-arranged participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak this evening? I don't think there's anyone online, but I'll ask, is there anyone online who wants to speak? There's no, please use the right hand feature. Okay, we're down to item F, which is declaration of conflict of interest. Do you have anything to declare this evening? Yeah,
Should the agenda be adopted as presented, the same thing as normally? For me,
say that again.
if the agenda is adopted as presented, the same thing that I typically comment on. Want folks to know.
Yep, no problem. Okay, we're down to approval of the agenda, and before somebody makes a motion, Justin, do we? I think we don't have, I don't have six, anything more from. That's correct. Okay, so we can remove item number six, from the agenda, so we want to make that motion.
I move to approve the agenda without M6.
Valdeck, that please. Is there a second? I'll second. Second by Schlaf. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, please call a vote to approve the agenda.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Griffin.
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yeah.
Alday,
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Motion carries, thank you. We have no public hearings this evening, so we're down to item I, which is our communications. We have our meeting calendar on page 11 of the packet. Anybody have any comments on the meeting calendar? Seeing none, we'll move into our first report tonight from the Public Services Superintendent. Hi, Tim, all right?
Good, how was everybody else tonight?
Good.
So we got a 2-week report, and a few things added to it when it's done. If there's any questions, we feel no.
I have one question, and maybe one comment. I noticed when I was out about this weekend that the new sidewalk that was poured along Dexter Harbor Road at the new building, I was forget the name of it. I'll do it. Here, building. It seems like it's undermining already
Okay.
from the rain and such, so just something to note.
Well, it's,
Into the repair, we'll see.
they gotta do some work on it too, because someone's out of compliance.
Okay,
So we'll talk to Chris, Chris and I
that's
discuss.
what I bring up.
Anything else?
What question I have, anybody else? Not yet, not yet, sir.
Couple things got started on hydrant flushing last week. It's early, obviously, because of the tower project. Tower will be out of service for roughly around a month. April 15th is, well, it's Sunday, I think it's the 16th, we're leaving. We got lucky and got a call from Biotech, and we were able to sludge it all last week. And they did it in a day and a half, which is crazy, and City Hall got to see all the trucks. So, I looked into the roundabout sidewalks, getting done and take care of it is the school's responsibility. Would call out to Brian to let him know, and he'll look into that. We had a water leak on Shield Road, ended up being a 12-inch gate valve. The bottom portion of the top, so the bolts had rusted, and the gasket had blown through, so we were able to take care of that last week. And then this morning we had to do a shutdown for Bates. They're doing some repair work, and schools do what they want, so they never put in a shut off, and we had to shut the main down. So, but that got taken care of, and they're good to go up in our operations. Okay.
We talked last week about the fallen limbs, and did you guys get the support you needed?
Yeah, actually, they went out, and it was only the two of them until I think it was Friday, and Kurt. They did really well, and then Friday they wrapped up, and they're still out there, obviously, and we're still working on that. I talked to Butch about it today. Kurt's off until Wednesday. So they're gonna keep working on that, especially on Wednesday, because that's the day they do it. We got some other things we're trying to get to do tomorrow, so we'll see how we're coming.
But it is, so it's not like a dog chasing its tail, but once you go out and collect, then more people rush out and
Yeah.
put more out, so you have to make your way back around, so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next up is our community development manager. Well, there's John, how are you?
I'm fine, Mr. Mayor, how are you today? Good, how's the rest of council? Excellent, I like when you guys are smiling, that's really great. Okay, so you have my report in front of me. Do you have any questions before I go into verbal updates and a couple comments on the supplement?
It doesn't look like it. Yeah,
Okay, so the one verbal, you noticed that we had a meeting with Eagle on the 23rd, and that meeting went really well. I was there, Mayor Keough, Justin, Tim Stewart, and our city attorney, as well as our environmental consultant, ASTI, and we met with a variety of people from Eagle regarding gas and soil testing in our right-of-way, groundwater testing of groundwater wells that are existing on 8140 Main, and we cleared up and got confirmation from Eagle that they do not consider the city nor the PDA as a liable entity as it pertains to 3045 Broad Street. They didn't understand dates on a couple of the documents associated with the deed and our BEA, the air plan, et cetera. That's all been cleared up. So that was a nice weight lifted off all of our shoulders. They'll be coming back with 2 scopes of work, so we know exactly what locations they'd like to test within our right of way, as well as the different existing groundwater monitoring wells that they're going to do some testing on. So we expect to happen in a few weeks, and we'll continue to recover through that.
which means the approval to, they're already in a permit, and we're being asked to approve that. That will be coming back to us with more detail. Before they can do it.
In the supplement, you do see our CDBG allocation for fiscal year 23-24 is a little over $7,000. When we combine that with the last fiscal year's allocation, we've got just about 14,000. Those are the banked funds. We'll continue to bank the funds for another 2 or 3 years. So we develop a nice fund balance to take on some more ADA grant improvements. The other thing in the supplement was the Cap Dart Regional Housing Group. They're helping to form that particular group. They start meeting in April, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Councilmember Michelle is your liaison, and Grace Whitney, our associate planner, also attends those. So we'll try to keep that information updated, especially since housing is such a big topic right now. And then there are answers to Councilmember Griffin's comments regarding 3045 Broad Street. If you've got any questions, or Jamie, if you've got any other questions, let me know that I need to know for you.
Not right now, thank you very much for all these suggestions.
That's all I've got. Is there any other questions for you?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The sheriff department has a written report in the packet. Ever have any comments or questions on the sheriff report? Being none, we'll move down to the city manager report. That's been very good.
We'll start with, does anybody have any questions? One item that I do have in here is, council voted for postponing a couple of items to work sessions, but didn't set dates for those work sessions. On the last page of my report, page 29 of 126, I provided some just dates to throw out there for those work sessions before city council meetings. Start those work sessions at 6, and then also I threw in some proposed dates for budget work sessions and city manager review. If those dates don't work for you, well, please let me know. Or if anybody has any thoughts or concerns with those dates. But yeah.
Yeah, good.
For the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing employee reviews, sit down one-on-ones with each employee. It's been a little while since we've done those, so thought it'd be a good time to meet with everybody. We're gonna be starting tree trimming in Westridge, and if you haven't already, if you have kids, they can take them to the Easter egg hunt in Community Park. Not this weekend, but the following weekend. We're going back to doing the Easter egg scramble, and then we also have, and I believe they're already out, the egg hunt. We have a ballot. We have one egg ballot in each park that folks can run around and try and find and come back here with the phrase of pays. Does anybody have any questions?
Justin, I have one question that I guess I just want to ask. The recommendation from Parks Commission related to the Hanover Travel Limited and the placement of logs,
Yeah, so
does that require a permit?
it does. It requires any permit.
And who would be the applicant for that permit?
So, Hanover Travel Limited is putting together the application, but they need our sign off to be able to submit it.
That's okay. So that's what we would be given permission for as part of the April 10th meeting?
Correct.
Sorry, did I jump on some information? Other questions for Justin?
I guess kind of related to that, that just made me think back to the beaver situation in Mill Creek. I don't know if there's any update on that or if it's been.
It's a tough situation. I mean, you know, we when that first came up, we did a lot of research into what can we do, and there really wasn't a whole lot. You know, we couldn't talk about like doing, you know, putting these pipes through the beaver dams without like actually like destroying the dam itself. We reached out to Eagle and their biologists, and they said, you know, you can't really relocate them because nobody wants them. And if you do like go in and destroy the dam and try and force them to relocate, then chances are in a couple of years they're going to be it's either gonna be them or another family that moves right back in. So it was kind of dropped because there really wasn't a whole lot that we could.
There's like
do with
no
it.
immediate damage happening, or you're like.
He's been placing the logs, has just given them free ammunition.
Oh, it just made me think about that. We talked about it a lot and then it didn't go anywhere and I just, so maybe it's just.
We did a lot of research when it first happened.
Right, right.
Just
Right.
wasn't really anywhere to go with that.
So the only solution is termination. I mean, unless you want to put up with the beavers.
Right.
I mean, you can't relocate them, they're nuisances and they're. They are what they are, they can be a nuisance. So, I mean, there's not really much you can do.
There was
So-
information brought back about it.
Yeah.
Good traffic.
You can trap,
Right.
but it's trapping each other.
Right.
And there was somebody interested in doing that.
There, we did get an email from a local, youth who had experience in, traffic determination. I mean, if that's the route that council would like to explore, maybe,
I just didn't know if there were any like known problems related to, again, if we're seeing secondary consequences of them being there.
so the big issue was, you know, there's basically upstream, there are areas with lots of trees. And by building up that dam, it floods out that area and kills those trees. There isn't necessarily direct damage like homes or businesses. That is expected because of it, but
Didn't we have some damage down at the park that Sean and a bunch of people went down and put mesh up?
We perceived it to be done. Yeah, so we did fence off a lot of our stuff, but we paid for it, so I couldn't.
No, you guys spent a lot of time and energy down there.
But, in hindsight, it was that there's also the times that it was, rabbits and deer as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't going away though. We know that, right? I mean, they're just gonna keep having babies. Which I don't, as long as it's not destroying any businesses or homes. That's not-
But I mean, you guys ready to come back with termination options?
It's up to you guys, but this problem's not gonna resolve itself, that's what I'm saying.
No, there could be more beavers after we kill these beavers.
Well, and there's just gonna be more beaver.
Right.
So,
I mean, I defer to the people who are dealing with remedying any possible, I mean, that's kind of why I was asking. I don't know to what extent we're spending resources to address anything. That's
Well, I mean, we really haven't, since we put the fencing up, we haven't really done.
I mean, I guess if it gets to the point where we're having to remediate some problem, then I think it's probably worth revisiting.
Other questions for Justin? Okay, I'll jump down to my report. As Michelle mentioned, we had a very good meeting with Eagle. Had 3 people from their office here, and there is concern. There is concern that if the TCE has migrated off-site, that it could propose a bigger problem for a neighboring business. So the closest property to that 3045 Broad Street is the dance studio. Relative to that direction. They talked about some geological monitoring that they're doing, or modeling of the groundwater, and they believe that it flows south and north generally, which would be from like Forest Lawn, through the site towards the gas station. And so they've reached out to the owners of Dancer's Edge and are working cooperatively with them to do some testing there in the future to make sure that they're safe. And that process will be starting, what did they say, in May, I think.
And
They still need to get a formal agreement to do it, I guess, right, or something, but they're cooperating with property owners. And then the second issue is all related to the Clark property, which is the gas station. And that's been in a formal settlement for years, and the state or the feds have money that comes through the state that they can pay for continued testing to see if the situation has waned, I guess is the word I use. I don't know whether it ever completely goes away, but if the contamination isn't as prevalent over time, they consider that if you get to a point where it gets below a certain parts per billion, then they can consider the situation closed. And that's what was really originally requested of us, was to allow access to some monitoring wells. And they want to access a couple of existing ones on the 8140 site. And then there's a number of them along Main Street. It wasn't real clear from the conversation how many were there and how many were still active or temporary. They prefer to sell them as temporary and sell them as active, but they're going to come back and clarify exactly where they would like to go. So there would be a clear map for us to look at and approve. But it was a much it was much better to talk to them face to face than to read emails or reports to read the letter in terms of their request. Their goal long term is just to make sure that none of the properties have been affected by anything. So as I mentioned earlier, Michelle's report, we'll be seeing those two scope of work for approval, in the near future. I have one meeting that I need to add to my list here that I didn't set until next weekend. On April 3rd, I'm going to meet with Will Hathaway from Scioto Township and Barry Lonick, their preservation coordinator, land preservation coordinator, as well as David Lutton and Tom Covert, related to the Scioto Township property. So I set that meeting up right after I wrote my letter here. So in my report. On April 4th, I'm going to join the folks from Common Sale. Eric is in the audience here, those of you who remember Eric to me. They've requested that or invited me to attend their meeting with MEDC when they go to ask for funding related to the project of 3045 Broad. I had shared with Kevin Denoyer, their president, that there's really a 40-year history of the village trying to remove the industrial property from downtown and transform them into something where there's people. And they thought that was a powerful message to share. So I'm going to try and convey that as part of my participation in the meeting. So I'll be announcing on that day with them. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, we're down to council member reports. Councilmember Michelle's requested that some information be put in the packet on page 33, so I'll turn it over to Zach.
Yeah, just at last meeting, there's some question as to whether or not my statement that there were environmental contaminants on DDA properties was correct or not, so I pulled from the Eagle environmental mapper that shows it. And it starts with owners shall prohibit activities that may result in exposure to hazardous substances and the deed restrictions. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Okay, go ahead.
Justin, do we comply with the restrictions?
We do believe that we meet the restricted covenants.
So there's nothing that the public walking around that area is exposed to anything that's a hazardous material.
Not that we're aware of.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm down to the consent agenda. Okay, 1 and 2, there are 2 items on the consent agenda. We'll move to approve the consent agenda. All right, go.
Move we approve the consent agenda. Bills and payroll amount $786,364.94 and the Bellwood Club road closure.
Okay, motion by Senator Farrell, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you both. Could you please call the vote to approve the consent agenda?
Michaels,
Yes.
Schlaf.
Yeah.
Griffin,
Yes.
Semi Fair,
Yes.
Holdag,
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We're down to unfinished business, L1, consideration / of naming policy. On page 63 of the packet.
Make a motion. I move that we go forward without a formal naming policy and leave the naming decision to the council at the time.
Second.
Motion by Alden, second by Joe Thompson. Okay, can you get that?
Not verbatim, but
What's he
just
say?
to not adopt a formal naming procedure.
Okay, discussion. Zach,
Should we at least maybe monetize that if we're gonna name it after someone, we contact their family before doing that? Could that be the formal naming policy? I guess not.
so I think your point is well taken. I think that should occur. I mean, hindsight, I should have done that. On the most recent, the only time I can think of naming something, yeah, that's probably what we should have done. I don't think that takes a policy to do though. Just we should remember to do it.
Well, we didn't have a foresight to do it when we were doing that.
So that's something that can't be corrected in the future. Jamie?
I guess, I mean, I'm in favor of having something. I don't know that it's like my top priority right now. I don't know what staff is on their plate. I don't know if, Zach's interested in drafting one on his own, even if it's as minimal as what you said, regarding contacting the family. I don't think having things in writing is a bad idea.
So now,
Yeah, for the reason I made the motion is that I feel it's, a naming policy is really making it too rigid in some forms. We don't have something like this coming that often to us. And, what it does, I think there is really matters what is the circumstance, what is the context of it happening and things like that. And to me, sometimes I'm a policy writer. I do a lot of policy writing day in, day out, and I'm in favor of policy. But in this one, sometimes policies can become too rigid and cause more issues than actually are trying to solve. So I think in this, because it is not something that day in, day out we really deal with, and it can come in so many different ways that unless we have a huge policy to cover everything, it could very easily fall out of it. It just makes more sense to leave it to the decision of the council of the time, when the circumstance comes about.
Justin,
So, with or without a policy, with respect to the most recent instance of having a proposal for somebody. I guess I just want to get everyone's sense of, should staff be doing anything?
I don't think so yet.
I mean, it's I mean, I'm waiting on council to give me direction with regard to hiring that person.
Zach?
Well, here's why having at least some guidance is important. As a public body, we're bound by the laws of state of Michigan and the US Constitution, which says we need to have equal process and due protection. So if we don't have any process and two different entities come in wanting to donate land and want to have naming rights, if we treat them differently, we open up ourselves to constitutional claims that we're treating entity A different than entity B. And if we don't have purpose or findings or reasons for doing that, then we get in trouble. And those are usually not good to think of ad hoc.
Well, just because we have done the research on these doesn't mean that we can't. If the situation is presented to us, look at them for guidance on questions we should ask and things we should think about. I mean, I don't know that dedicating a park or something in somebody's name or a portion of the park or whatever is creating any constitutional injustice. And these are references, whether we adopt one or not, they could still be a reference the next time somebody goes to do this. In terms of discussing how we do it before we do it. I mean, we came up with that sentiment pretty quickly on our own as a council, and there was quite a bit of good sentiment behind it. Okay, and then it's been since, you know, what we call redacted, or what we call it, taken back because we were afraid we went over too fast without whatever. Doesn't, I mean. I think it's good that we've done the research, but I also don't think we need a formal policy. I don't think the situation comes up nearly often enough to worry about it.
I was just gonna say, I think Zach's point was just that if how this is handled in the future, it's handled differently in different situations, and there's no policy indicating why that's happening. That's when you open yourself up to some potential claim, not the act of one naming, but the act of multiple naming in a different, following a different process. So Just to clarify that, so everyone doesn't misunderstand that.
No?
I'm still in favor of having some policy. Again, it's not my highest priority, but I think we could work towards that.
Any other comments? Okay, so we have a motion by Albright, second by Simon Farrell to essentially forego having a formal naming policy. Thirty, can call that vote?
Yes, sorry.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yes.
Michaels,
No,
Carries. So we are on to new business. There's M1. Which is consideration of the common sale extension request for the 3045 Broad Street tree development agreement. Page 93 of our packet.
Grant County Sales Development Agreement, small extension to the option period. Determining that the county sales development period is making active good progress toward obtaining conceptual plan studies and performance. An extension from the option needed to shift to section 2. City of Dexter downtown redevelopment opportunity redevelopment in October.
Okay, so you just moved the motion on page 94, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a second?
I just wanted to say it's difficult to hear you when you speak at that level, so I'm in the future you can speak.
Apologize. Try to be louder.
Okay, so I think he moved the adjusted motion that was on page 94. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Thank you both. Okay, discussion? Or Michelle, if you have anything to add, is there other questions from council? Zach?
if this isn't extended, they can continue to work on a project for the site, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
If this extension is not granted, they're still free to continue to work on a project at the site, they just don't have exclusivity. Is that fair characterization?
Somewhat, yeah. The agreement ends in August. I'm sorry, April. You're right, they would lose the exclusivity. But they could, if they so choose, continue the remaining due diligence activities. I don't know how comfortable they would be if we could extend that.
I do have a couple questions. The design that they're working with, does it still have two surface parking lots on the easterly side of Broad?
Yes.
There is the parking lot at the corner of Broad and Forest. It would be a more formal parking lot than what we have currently.
That side is still two surface parking lots, correct?
Correct.
And the design,
It's not a parking structure anymore.
right, the design includes ground level parking next to the commercial component at ground level, is that correct? Been a while since.
Inside the building, I can provide you with the parking on Broad Street is proposed to be underground and first level in the building, under the building, in the building.
And we're still looking at only one or two commercial units.
We're looking at approximately 13,000 square feet of retail. Just over 10.
But just in the northernest portion of the building, like the southern portion is all.
Correct, the portion that runs onto Forest looks out over the park.
Okay.
And a small portion, I think, looks out onto Broad.
Right, I do not support this because that's the vision for the site for downtown doesn't include more surface parking. We've got plans to add more on-street parking. It's going to create a dead zone having ground level parking right next to the retail. One of the shortcomings in our economic development plan when we were here last was that we don't have enough retail space downtown. this is gonna contribute to it, it's not gonna expand downtown, it's gonna be a satellite to downtown, so I do not support at this time. Thank you.
Other comments or questions for Jamie?
I guess, do we know why the delay? Why the extension?
So the initial extent, the initial period was 6 months. It was as you can see in the agreement, it was always intended that if additional time was needed, it would be 4 months. Excuse me. The redrilling that ended up needing to be done did put things back about 30 days or so. But even without that, they'd be coming back asking us for some additional time. And it's not uncommon, if you think of this as a pre-purchase agreement. Normally, when a developer purchases property, they're going to bake into that purchase agreement a due diligence period that can be anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on the site and the negotiation. With that initial period, there is always an additional set of time in case it takes longer to get through the due diligence, which can include the geotech that they're doing, the environmental studies, which they're going to be doing, and then land entitlement, which is site plan review of PUD. So this follows a very standard process.
Yeah, I guess just to share my thoughts, I feel like as a council among these specific people, we probably had more conversations about Sloan Kingsley and a vision about Sloan Kingsley and what that might look like than we have necessarily about this set of parcels in this part of the city. And I understand that there have been a lot of discussions among different bodies over a long period of time, but I guess as we've seen that when new councils are seated, years of work in a certain direction can suddenly change. And I guess I asked a series of specific questions, which the answers to which appear in the supplement, and I'm appreciative of that information. I guess I maybe have a different vision for that area than certainly the level of density we've seen proposed to date. And I know there are many residents who also have a potentially different vision for that area. And there is a lot of development that's coming in that area anyways, and those are parcels that we don't own, that we don't have any control over. This is a parcel that we do have some input on, and so I just want to share that I'm not sure this is consistent with the vision that I would have for that area, and I would invite other council members to just ask themselves that question and let them know that I guess they have the opportunity to say that, you know, whether it's consistent with their vision or the vision they've heard from other residents, and if there's a reason to revisit it as council, as a community, given how much time has been spent, maybe sentiment has changed over time in the community or among those bodies, whether this accurately reflects the vision we have for that. I won't be voting to extend that because I think, given all of the other development happening in the area, I would rather discuss a different vision for the use of this land. Thanks.
Sure. Other questions or comments?
So they're proposing still a concept. The 3045 Broad Street Committee, working through this with them, isn't giving authorization for what's being designed and laid out. In theory, in the concept, we're going through this process with Common Sale to figure out if the density that they're proposing in the design and layout of the site that they're proposing can work financially for them, for the city, with the different tools that we need to utilize in order to make a project like this work. because it is, when it's a brownfield. This project still has to go through the planning commission and city council through the PUD process. It's my understanding, and Eric will correct me if I'm misspeaking. Once we get a clear understanding of what MEDC's participation will be in this project. And we know exactly, to a certain degree of confidence, where the funding is gonna happen. They will start moving forward for the pre-development agreement with the property purchase negotiation, and then they'll go into PUD to start really knowing, okay, is this going to be accepted by the community, by the planning commission? That becomes that becomes where how this looks, how many units, etc., will go down the road for what it's actually going to be. I hope that helps make some sense. I can't tell you that it's absolutely going to look exactly like what it does like this.
Jamie, what is the density for your vision?
Say that again.
What is the density associated with your vision? You alluded to.
Yeah, that's a good
different
question.
density.
I mean, it's something I would need to revisit. I'm getting a lot of feedback from residents that they would rather see it for a park use or a public use. And, you know, if you look at the dollars and cents of it, I would be curious to know, you know, various densities, various development prospects, what does the city stand to gain from it? We owe almost $1.5 million on it, the DDA does. It's not clear to me that we're going to sell it for $1.5 million. And so I would be interested to evaluate that trade-off with hard numbers to the extent that we're able to generate them. And it might be the case that, okay, so there's lost property tax revenue if you don't develop it into housing. Do residents feel that they would rather it stay park or some other public use, and they're willing to bear the burden of additional, you know, property tax increases because we don't have that revenue in the form of additional housing? I think that if the information were available to the public, maybe they'd be able to better evaluate what they might want to happen there. And I guess I'm hearing a lot too about 8180 and everything down Grand Street. And again, we've had a lot of conversations about Thom Kingsley, but I don't think we've had, you know, Ron Miller, it wasn't that long ago that he was here talking about what's the vision for downtown, and do we have that? And maybe that's already stated in master plans and strategic plans or things like that, but maybe that's something we need to do better communicating with the public and newsletters or things like that. But also then to Michelle's point that this is still early in the process. Well, in my experience, that it's much harder to stop and or change things the further down the process they get. So I can certainly appreciate that there would be a lot of approvals that need to happen. But again, in my experience, by the time something gets to the planning commission for PUD approval, it's like too little too late to speak up about it. So I'd rather try to get this in front of the public as, you know, early as possible. So making those more detailed comments tonight, hopefully we'll do that.
So we have based everything we're doing on past public comment, you know that, right?
Right.
Okay.
And that was like Norfolk back in the late 2010.
No, I guess in 2018, when
Yeah, the
the
late
Norfolk
2010s.
stuff came through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a year or so before pre-COVID,
Right.
you know, for years. The other thing, is that, you know, they can't go in front of planning commission until they have ownership of the property or controlling interest in the property for our process. So, you know, that public process is still in front of us. The only way to get there would be if they had some type of purchase agreement at some point. The DDA, you know, is the owner of the land and is the one that has expressed the interest in having a transformation from the old industrial property to people. But I appreciate your comments on that. I mean, it's good you're thinking about it. There is also a, updated strategic plan that the DDA is gonna develop. They just, well, we're basically gonna hire a consultant in April, we'll verify the scope and get that in there, or whatever, but that process is gonna start, and I would encourage any resident that wants to participate in that to do so at that time.
To add on, if you don't mind, could I-
Sure, go ahead.
The April 20th DDA meeting will be the meeting in which the consultant comes, and the actual first task that they'll be taking on with the DDA is to outline what the public engagement process is going to be for updating the strategic plan. And so there will actually be a public participation plan that comes out of the feedback that's given in that meeting. And that will become the roadmap by which the DDA uses going forward. Sorry, Sean. I didn't mean to-
No, it's okay. I was most interested in James' comment about less density as to what that meant, because there's a difference between no density and less density. And I want to make sure I was understanding what you're saying or not, because, you know, I've heard a lot of people say, you know, if you could put 2 more 150 Jeffords there, think they'd be fine with it. You know, I don't know what that number is, it'd be 50 units or something, right? You know, so I was just curious if that's what you heard for that, like, for that.
Yeah, I think I've heard more just park or public use, or people said, oh, that'd be great spot for a splash pad. I mean, just comments that people can make offhand without necessarily knowing what the existing infrastructure is and,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And I guess I just feel like any process is gonna be made better by raising those points. Even if I maybe don't have a specific vision in mind, but the better we can address those concerns among the public, I think the better the outcome will be. Because we either incorporate that feedback somehow in the end result, or we're better able to communicate to the public why we're making the decision we're making. So I guess I'm just.
Yeah, just as long as you're presenting that there has been a tremendous amount of public input gathered into it, you know, to this point. So.
Right.
I also want to point out that I think, I just got this tonight, so I'm staring at this, Justin. Did you look at the other, Michelle, who has any questions?
The questions that Jamie had?
Yeah, I'm not completely sure that the amount on the substation is correct.
I got that right from the closing document.
Okay, well, we DDA also paid to upgrade the electric system along Grand and Broad in that area as a replacement for the substation. So I didn't know if those costs were important to you, but the value of the land was maybe valued at the 125 because that's what it appraised at, or that's what either DTE or somebody appraised it at. But if there was more dollars invested in eliminating the substation, it was not a popular building other than being an old building. Then just the 125 is all I wanted to say. Or we swapped, you know, swap property.
Right, and that was another $187,000.
Go, I'm sorry, Eugene.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I understand what Councilmember Griffin said about not necessarily agreeing with the development that's there, and going way back to when this development was first done, or was first talked about with the very first developer, I just stopped going to the meetings because I didn't agree with the direction that it was going, and I didn't feel like it had any input. But part of that is whatever development we do has to be economically feasible, and we've had a lot of difficulty even getting to this limited point of getting to a project that might work out economically. So open spaces are a concern for people. But one of the other things that people in our community, many people in our community have voiced as a concern is housing and housing that's affordable. One of the main ways you get to more affordable housing is having more housing, more supply with increasing demand tends to drive some of those prices down. So in this area, we have a lot of, there's a lot of interest in green space and preserving open lands. We have preservation villages. Typically, those type of efforts drive up housing prices because they decrease the amount of land that can be developed. And so you have less land, so your housing becomes more expensive. And there are places in the United States where it's extreme, where the amount of preservation has been done and really one that goes to the point where there just isn't enough housing. So if I was gonna do this, if I was gonna say what I want to see there, it wouldn't be a park, it'd be some kind of housing. But it would probably be different than whatever's being proposed, but I don't know if what I would propose would necessarily work out from the economic standpoint. And I think it's really important with the projects that we have, the one that we had the pre-meeting in on Grand Street, on this one, these are going to be really important. I think they'll be very important to housing and making housing in the community more diverse and more team. And I see that this particular project as being part of that picture overall, a part of that overall, or part of that puzzle, one of the pieces that goes in there that to do that. So I would just say, I agree with what you're saying. It's not necessarily exactly what I would want. I just don't, I do know I wouldn't want it to be part. I would say that, so.
Zach?
Just had a clarification for staff. I'm an expert in many zoning ordinances, but not ours. Does ours say only the property owner can apply for land entitlement? Or with permission of the property owner?
It would be, you can come in for PUD, starting with the conceptual level. On what you just said, landowner signing, but we're, the DD is the landowner. So they're signing an application. When I discussed it with the city attorney, you start to get in some uncomfortable gray areas when you don't have a negotiated sales agreement. So that's why they haven't come to conceptual yet.
Okay. A subtle point of clarification. If when more housing is added to an area that has high prices, it tends to not drive prices down, but reduces the increase of rate. Because people aren't going to sell their houses at a loss. It's a subtle little thing, but it's rather vexing for folks working on housing policy. That's all.
Jamie?
Yeah, I guess that was one question I had, because I think last time we discussed this, what was being proposed was rental.
It's still being proposed as rental.
Yeah. So I guess it's just not clear to me, the relationship between market rate rental,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, market rate.
Market rate rentals and what that does for the affordability of housing, single family homes, that sort of thing. I don't know what the relationship is between that. And I think I had asked a while back if we could see some estimate of, like, just even how many rentals we currently have in the city, what we expect the demand to be. I don't know, some sort of assessment of likely demand for these. I don't know how, when we capture that.
So we know that the only rental complex that's been developed was developed back in the 80s in that Walkabout Creek. And it started out as a secondary housing, or a significant portion of it was that. And they used, if I'm not mistaken, it was low income housing tax credits. And over time, those expire and the number of units have reduced. And they even changed from these strictly section 8 to subsidized, but not section 8. And there's I believe it's 20 units out of all of them now that are what they fall under as a affordable class. We do not have an inventory of rental units that are part of houses that have been converted over time. That short of having, and that's part of what's being worked on through rental inspection, would be a rental registration. Because you can't inspect what we don't know. So, if you look at just Walkabout Creek, and that's the given, that's the known. That's the only rentals that we have, and they have a waiting list. And they've had a waiting list since before COVID.
And the vast majority, I think, of the units are going to be 1 bedroom.
You sure?
Sorry.
Well,
I wouldn't say that the vast majority are going to be 1 bedroom. I know that they are still shuffling the numbers, like there were some 3 bedrooms, and I think they're going to make only 2 bedrooms, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a percentage of the whole, right now, we reduced it from when you last saw it at about 170 to 180 units to right now 154 units in total. We've got probably 5% of those are studios. The other, I believe offhand, the other 10% are 2 bedrooms, and the remaining portion are a mix of various 1 bedrooms and sizes. We did conduct a market study internally. I think that was also shared with the Broad Street Subcommittee, verifying that 154 units was demanded and could be absorbed. And so I do think that broadly speaking, there is demand for the rental product. If I may, can I make one comment about the pre-development agreement specifically?
sure.
Thank you. So the extension that we are requesting is based on, as it is within the pre-development agreement and this extension, is solely based on if we've made good faith progress specific to concept plans, pro forma underwriting, and an overall discussion and movement of the Broad Street Committee, I do believe. So the merits of denying the extension on grounds of retail or things of that nature, I would completely agree with Michelle that opportunity is coming once we bring this forward through a purchase agreement. The purpose of the next 4 months is really, as Michelle indicated, is to have the opportunity to talk to the MEDC about funding for the project. That is a very critical go, no-go decision that we've yet to have. That is coming on April 4th, where a conversation will be had at sort of a bottom-up approach. We're top-down approach, bottom-up, whatever you want to look at it. Have a conversation with some of the senior executives about the opportunity, and then submit an application, formally or informally, whatever they prefer, with respect to the incentive requests that we are making. I'd also throw out there that right now, approximately 40% of the units are at 80% of area median income for Washtenaw County specifically. And so there is a degree of affordability to this project. So when we come to design and going through the PUD process, I think Michelle very well knows, it would be great if we could go talk to the planning commission. Honestly, we've been asking, and this is the ordinance. And so the hope here is to get an understanding in the next 4 months with respect to the MEDC, with respect to the TIF, with respect to the land, how it will be treated. And our hope is that in the next 4 months, we can sort through those items so that we can then move forward with that PUD process where it would come to this body for overall review. And that's all I want to say about the agreement.
Thanks, Eric. Zach, I wholeheartedly would appreciate your expertise from outside of the community on the ordinance. You think there's a better way. I mean, I've said to Michelle directly, I think it's silly that we can't have our own property, a project that's on our own project, our own property, so to speak, DDA or otherwise. go before the planning commission and get comments. It seems counterproductive to me, but I'm not trying to play our lawyer, and she likes to put our lawyer on that. So if you've got an idea, I'm all ears. You don't have to have it today, but I'm asking, if you think there's something that, wow, that, let me know, let us know. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, one thing that we haven't discussed in all this, and I haven't even brought it up to Eric, and it just popped up as we're standing here. If the 3045 Broad Street committee is amenable, if the developer's amenable, we could hold an open house to have the public come in and interact with the 3045 Broad Street committee, the developer, see what's being proposed, ask questions, get answers, provide feedback. We could do an open house of that type of nature. It's not decision makers, but it's the public, and they're going to influence the ultimately decision makers. That's something we could talk about. If you guys are amenable to that.
I approve,
Yeah, it's a fine idea, but I think they would want this to be extended.
Oh, no, I'm saying,
Those are all-
this needs to be extended. I'm not saying do a public engagement and then come back and do this. This is on the table and this needs to be considered. And there are ways that we can continue to move forward to address some of the questions and comments that have come up today.
Jan?
Just another point of clarification on the timeline. So Michelle, you described this as like a pre-purchase agreement.
Yeah.
Given that DBA owns this property, what does an eventual sale of the property look like? What sort of meetings are held? Who makes the final vote? That sort of a thing.
So right now, all meetings go through 3045 Broad Street Committee or this subset of the Broad Street Committee that looks very specifically at the numbers. And that's where the pro forma is the next thing. Once we get through the pro formas with the 3045 Broad Street Committee and everybody's comfortable with the numbers, we keep the DDA informed. We also keep you informed through my reports. Excuse me. When we get to the point where the committee and the developer have landed on the pro forma, they're both in agreement with the numbers, that will be the time when the price for the property is finalized, negotiated. It's been made very clear to the developer. Zero is not an option. There has to be, the property has a value, the public expects, if not the entire purchase price, they expect the property to be purchased for a sum of money. And that's where the pro forma analysis comes in to determine what is that amount going to be based on the cost to do the things that the city expects the developer to do and what the developer needs to do to make that property valuable. So
The final sale.
the final sale number will be the DDA, but council will be brought along with Captain Flynn through the whole thing, either by myself and or with Sean.
But it's not a motion council made.
No, it's not a motion company.
Well, the reason council's participating in this agreement right now is because one of the properties that they're evaluating is one of the city, is the 89, I think, right?
Right.
So, the purchase agreement is between the DDA and common sale for the other properties. The city is being part of that.
Right.
I think that was what you were asking.
Right. And I just want that to be made clear to the public, or I want the public to accurately understand that, so they know that, oh, they might think there's public property, and they might think they have an opportunity to weigh in on that, and I
Yeah,
want,
it's all public, right? Just a different corner.
right.
And the DDA.
I just think there's less general awareness of the DDA and the role it plays, and I just want to make sure I understand it so I can communicate it.
No problem. Try to help you.
Thank you.
Other questions or can I call the vote on the motion by Senator Farrell, second by Flack, to approve the redevelopment area extension, as stated in on page 94. Figure, please call the vote.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Titus,
No,
Aldag,
Yes.
Griffin,
No,
Schlack,
Yes.
Kia.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Eric, thanks for coming tonight. Really appreciate your vision. Michelle, thanks for your work on things. New business.
Yeah, I hope you well. Sorry, I went to grad school. All right, see you guys.
Friendly community. New business item M2, consideration of line striping bid from M&M Pavement Markings. Joe?
I would like to talk about culture separately, so I will make a motion to award the 2023 pavement marking work and then pavement marking for base and alternate 2 in a total of $33,455.14.
Base plus alternate 2, is that it?
Yes.
Okay, 33, 455, 14. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Schlaf, thank you. Okay. You made the motion, Joe?
Yeah, I think we should do the striking. I don't know if I'm in favor of doing the Central Street bike lane, so that's why I wanted to vote on the other 2 first. So no issues with the ones alternate 2 and the base.
Okay. Second,
wanted to point out that the math is incorrect for the vault, for the cost for the alternate 2. It's 200 linear feet at $4.50 a linear feet. So motion ought to be amended with the corrected amounts. Did this come, a couple of questions, did this request for the striping in front come from the DFD board or DFD chief? Do you know?
I believe it came from the chief.
And do we see a lot of vehicles stopped parking there, or is it backed up from traffic?
So at the chief's request, I included it in the bid as an option. Because of where it is and the potential impact, I specifically included it as an alternate rather than in the base bid. Give council an opportunity to weigh in on it. As far as the actual, how many cars stop in front of 8140, I couldn't tell you, I don't have those numbers.
Is this on the curb or is it striping out of the road?
in the road,
It's in the road.
How far out? 3 feet, 4 feet, the entire lane,
2 lanes.
the whole 2 lanes,
Mhm.
the entire length of the curb?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I have never seen a car just park anywhere there. It's not a comfortable spot for a car to park. It ought to be a no standing, if that's what we're concerned about.
So no problem in the sense of when you are driving down Main Street, you're not stopping in front of.
Yeah, that's a no standing zone, not a no parking zone.
We can get it called out correctly. Just back to your initial point, though, the M&M pavement marking is $1, not $4.50. Weekdays is $4.50.
Okay, my problem. I didn't follow the graph over.
That's okay. David,
I just want to clarify, so this is just random, for the base bid, this is just randomly throughout the city, there are places that they're touching up everywhere, or?
So it is all of those places that need touch-ups. And Kurt does that evaluation by driving around and making a note of, 200 feet here, 300 feet here. So the numbers for the base bid, as far as the approximate length number, come directly from the DPW.
the quantities and.
The quantities.
Are we,
Yeah, oh, sorry. David,
Yeah, okay.
so
yeah, are we proposing adding new stop bars anywhere as part of this, or this is just,
Not as part of this current.
this is just redoing existing?
Is Zach?
A question for council members to consider. Are we interested in issuing tickets for folks who are standing in the strike zone that says no standing? If not, we've created an environment where folks are not following the law and we're not enforcing it. And that's usually not good.
Jamie?
So the thinking is that when traffic is backing up, they want to make sure nobody's blocking that drive.
Correct.
Yeah, it's like one of those where they say, signs that say do not block intersection.
Right, but these are stripes on the road.
Mhm.
It would delineate that,
Right, I just don't know, I mean, one, I think some education would need to be required, and two, I don't know if like a vertical sign is ever used in that case, or
Probably in advance of it, yes.
in advance of it, or alongside of it, I just don't know that people are going to be inclined to see it on the street when, there's a lot to pay attention to in that area, so.
Any new traffic thing needs to be explained and
Right.
done, explained well. We
Right.
saw that with the rapid flashing beacons.
Right.
We saw it when we had the camera sensors on the lights in downtown. There's been numerous opportunities where we've had to explain what they mean and why. Doug thought it might be a good idea to have a clear zone there, for lack of a better word. If understanding is the right word, then that's what we have to use. That's it. Okay, seeing no further hands, please call the vote to approve the motion that was made to approve the main bid plus the alternate number 2.
Griffin,
Yes.
Michaels,
No,
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yeah.
all day,
Yes.
Keo.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Was there a question you had about the other? The alternate one, or you just leaving it as you don't know?
I was leaving it for somebody else to make a motion.
Gotcha.
I'll make the motion, including alternate one, Central Street Bike Lane, $11,600.
Okay, motion by Michelle's,
I second.
second by Alden.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, questions?
So, well, say if I can.
Yeah, please, Mr. Miller.
Alternate one was discussed during council objectives as, providing a test area for, delineating and calling out, the bicycle lanes, starting with. So, as part of the bid, we included it as an alternate, again, to see, well, number one, we don't have anywhere else in the city that would use that type of paint. Because it's a specific, like, grittier paint that prevents, slipping and sliding. But also to see what it might cost to do it. The M&M, when they provided the bid, didn't have their figures for that type of paint. And so what's proposed in here is going based on the PK bid and assuming that that's gonna be on the high end of what M&M would do.
So let me clarify, so the first bid we did was to have M&M do base bid and alt 1, or alt 2. I would, Zach, were you suggesting the PK do, accept alt 1 from PK?
It was just a motion to approve it for that money, so whichever vendor does it for that money.
Usually we approve a contract or a vendor with it.
And I would still likely go with M&M because they're already gonna be here, and I'm gonna guess based on the numbers that PK provided.
It's probably a different crew, so
Well, true.
it's a specialized thing.
But I still think just based on all of the other figures from PK, that M&M's bid is probably going to be less.
Okay, so you want, so the motion is to approve up to 11,600 to get the green paint in the bike lane stack, is that what I'm saying?
Yep,
Okay. That's all there, if you understood it, okay, just want to check out motion. Okay, question?
So we will still have, regardless of whether the green paint's there, we still do have a bike lane. Correct. And so this is because we want to differentiate it, we want the grittier paint for traction, what's the rationale?
I think, when it was discussed as part of council goals and objectives, it was to call it out and make it safer. That, you know, folks are drifting into the bicycle lane that's specifically called out and very prominent and noticeable.
So you've seen this, right? And I think Anniversary Road between, near 94. Take downtown Ann Arbor.
Right, that's my concern.
No, I'm just giving you an example.
No,
What is your concern?
my concern is there's already a lane there, there's already solid white line. I mean, I understand the idea that you want to differentiate, but people tend, I mean, that's the way you're trained, right? There's a white line on the right, there's a yellow line on the left, you stay in between them. And that area is differentiated, put off for the bike riders. The other thing is, the bike riders don't have to stay in that lane. They can ride anywhere they want in the lane. They're considered legal, right, to drive down. So they don't have to use that if they don't want to either. So it's, I just think it's an add-on that I don't know that I necessarily agree with, but I mean, if everybody else thinks it's a good idea, that's fine. It's just not something I think that, I think you put $11,000 to better yourself. So.
That,
So I can speak to this, based on my experience with urban design and cognitive psychology. One of the biggest predictors of travel speed, it's not what number you put on the sign, it's how comfortable the driver feels in the space. One of the best ways to reduce speed is to make it feel like it's tight. So I'll use the example, take Jackson Avenue, drive through the west side of Ann Arbor where it's 4 lanes there, after it's gone through the diet, it's back to 4 lanes. Keep driving to Arborland. It's the same speed limit in Ann Arbor where you feel like you're gonna hit the curb in the tree versus where you are in Arborland. I guarantee you, if you're not paying attention, you're gonna be driving 10 to 15 miles per hour faster in Arborland because you feel comfortable. The main thrust why folks are doing green paint down is to give the perception that the road surface is smaller, so that the cars feel tighter, so that instead of having the curves in the extra 5 feet, it feels like they are. So that's the main value, is you reduce vehicle travel speeds. And you make it safer both for the pedestrians and the bicyclists.
yeah,
I have a question generally about, or I guess a comment about. Is Central the only place we have a bike lane? We have it on Dexter and Arbor Road also? Those are the 2 streets we have bike lane?
And the third rod.
Third and Broad, so you're taking Third. And then all the way along on Broad Street?
No, not yet.
yeah, we know.
Okay, I'm just saying, kind of in my anecdotal experience, in terms of our connectivity to the border to border, you know, we have like that part of downtown that's connecting one trail to the next trail. If you go to the border to border trail website, they show the Ann Arbor to Dexter corridor ends where the trail stops on Central Street, by DPW there. And then it shows that the Hudson Mills Metro Park corridor picks up again at our switchback by the gas station there, across from Alpine. So they don't designate anything within the city, which probably makes sense, because I don't know, it's part of the city.
There are signs that.
That kind of direct them.
Yeah.
But so then people are directed off the trail down Central Street, all the way to Ann Arbor Street, to the switchback. Or are they directed to Third and Broad?
So there are different routes. So there's one route that directs pedestrians towards the stairs near the library. And then there's a route that directs bicyclists towards the switchback on Jefferson. With one being an accessible route and one being a non-accessible route.
Do both of those tell people to take Central all the way down to Ann Arbor Street?
I believe based on the signage that is one option that is provided.
I think it just, to me, it seems like a more, I mean, that's just so congested there, where Central meets with Ann Arbor Street. And then you're going by all that parking in front of Joe and Rosie, you're going through the intersection and then all that other parking. It seems to me, when I've seen people on their bikes, they'll take the trail and then they'll take Third to Broad to Fifth to Alpine to be behind those parked cars as little as possible. So I think my only hesitancy in calling out a bike lane on Central Street in Green Paint is that I don't think it's the best route. If what we're trying, if we think the majority of users are coming from the trail or going to the other trail, I would rather highlight some other route and make that more obvious with the green paint, although I appreciate the point about slowing traffic, on that street. So I guess I haven't necessarily decided if I were to call out, agree with the green paint, I think it would be only for the traffic slowing, not because I actually think it's the best bike route through town, because I don't think it is.
So I know at Fifth Street, I think it is where the designated bicycle lane ends. Once you get closer to the park. But I mean, you know, whether or not. I don't know that the green paint is necessarily one-to-one, it is not. It's not intended to guide you towards the border trail, it's to call out the.
Right.
What did we budget this year for spending?
I want to say we budgeted between 35 and 40.
So pretty well on budget, but good time. Any other questions? I'm gonna ask a question. Patrick, did we forget anything or do anything out? I think you got it all. Or judge traffic guy, so. Okay, so we have a motion by Michelle, second by Aldag, to approve up to 11,600. Authorize staff to take the bike lanes with the green pigmented. Invasive.
Can I just clarify, so what are the endpoints of that? Is it?
All the designated bike lanes.
On Saturday. And I believe it's
Oh,
from,
not out there, Josh?
no, this is just Central Street.
Well, why would we only do central? I guess I asked that part. Why would we only do central?
So,
Just because what came up in the full setting?
and the intent was to go use it as a
Test.
test.
I'm inclined to want to postpone this part of it until, you know, what the total cost is with the other area. They're brought us right opposite, to do one and not the other doesn't make any sense.
Do you also want to do the Ann Arbor Street?
Is there a designated bike lane on Ann Arbor Street?
Basically, it drops off at, just before getting into town of Kensington.
Coming up as helpful.
Yeah. And maybe just to clarify too, that the green paint is really more, for emphasis at intersections. So it wouldn't be that the whole bike lane is painted green. It would really be, as you come up to an intersection, the details basically, you basically paint that portion as you go through the intersection on like a side street, say at 4th Street, 3rd Street. I don't think you necessarily do it at, I'm sorry, maybe not at 3rd because that's a larger intersection. And it's really to give motorists kind of the cue that, hey, there is a bike lane to your right at this intersection, to make sure people are aware. It's kind of highlighting the potential conflict points. Would not paint the lane end to end as green.
So what's the 1,000 square feet?
I think it would basically be in each one of those intersections.
All right, I'd like to suggest we postpone this and ask staff to bring back a better description of where the 1,000 square feet is, so we have a picture of what we're expecting out of it.
I'll move to postpone, consideration of line striping, regarding the green paint on the high school. Yeah, regarding the one,
Okay.
until staff can provide additional information.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Someone want to support that?
I'll second.
Dan, thank you. Any discussion on the postponement? Okay, please call the vote to postpone.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yeah.
Griffin,
Yes.
Michaels,
Yes,
Alden,
Yeah.
Keo.
Yes. Thank you. Motion and for the postpone of the next meeting. The business item M3, consideration of water tower painting services from Vito Incorporated. In an amount not to exceed $69,999. Anyone want to make that motion? And this includes, I believe, 2 names on the water.
I'll move to approve the water tower painting services in an amount not to exceed $69,999, provided that only one side of the water tower.
Fair motion. Fair motion. Is there a second?
second.
Second by Michelle, thank you. Dare I ask, is there any discussion?
I just received feedback from a resident after our last meeting. They weren't able to reach out to me in advance, and it sounds like maybe there had been some prior discussion of this in years past, or at least related to what color it was painted, and it seemed like there was a lot of consideration given to the the water tower to blend into the background as much as possible, be unobtrusive, and so trying to balance, and I think the sign ordinance was also raised by that resident, and so the sign ordinance, whether it applies to the water tower or not, I think the spirit of the ordinance applies to the water tower. So highlights from the ordinance where it says, signs should be sufficient but not excessive to perform their intended function. They should not contribute to the visual clutter or distract from scenic resources or views. And so I think it was the perception of the resident that signage that would directly face Dexter Crossing or that general area maybe is not as informative, given that people in that general vicinity know where they live, and calling their attention to it. Maybe it's contributing to the visual clutter, whereas signage, you're labeling it on the, other side, wherever it would be, where you can view it from further away, that might actually serve its intended purpose better.
Any other
I don't know if
questions?
that's south or west or southwest.
From the top of the Baker Road bridge over the expressway.
Yeah, I think you orient it so that like the point furthest where it's highest, you can see it, whatever
Okay, we'll let Tim figure that out.
I thought we did.
Okay, so motion by Griffin, second by Michelle's to accept the quote from water tower painting from Vito for amount not to exceed $69,999 with one set of lettering. Please call the vote.
Schlaf,
Yes.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Alden,
yes.
Michaels,
Yes,
Griffin,
Yes.
Keo.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item M4, consideration of the ancillary servicing bid with Cadillac Asphalt in an amount not to exceed $844,250, which is the bid price plus a 10% contingency. So effective bid price plus authorizing the 10% contingency. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
I second.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay, discussion, or questions? I'll choose Patrick, provide some information.
Sure, so, this was the planned project for, this summer. It'll be split by 2 fiscal years. It'll start after school lets out. At least the Dan Point portion of it will start after school lets out and complete before, school gets back in. There are, a few different components of this project being, the east and west sides of Dan Boy with a fog seal in the middle. Lexington, from Dan Boy to Ann Arbor Street. The sidewalk at Edison and Ann Arbor Street. And then spot curb and gutter throughout Huron Farms. We decided to combine all of this into one project to make it easier to bid and administer. And we feel that even though we only got one bid per OHM recommendation, felt the bid was fair. Back to my.
I think I would just add to that, part of the reason we felt the bid was fair, first of all, we worked with Cadillac Asphalt, a number of occasions. I guess the last project they did was, I see Dan laughing. No, they're very, there was a good contractor, they really, we kind of did quite a bit of road work in 2015 and then another program in 16. Very flexible and got in, got out, got the job done. We had estimated this project at about $850,000. So we were pleased to see it come in under budget. So that's another reason that we're pretty comfortable, going forward with them. We know they have the crews and, they are the manufacturer of the asphalt. So, they should be able to make sure that they hit the windows that are in. And as Justin mentioned, there is a little bit of concrete work on Dexter and Arbor, or actually Ann Arbor Street, and then within the subdivision. And so with their crews usually have pretty good subs that can work that portion of it. We're good if council's looking to move forward with it. We think it would be a good project to do.
So this does include from Lexington, the bypass, I guess as Tim called it.
It does.
Okay, and that was maybe not sure the last time we talked about this.
It was gonna depend on bid price.
Is this project going to reduce any of the super elevation in that section of Dan Hoy? Is it going to retain the same?
No, it'll maintain the same geometric essentially.
And how long is the expected life of 3.5 inches of hot mix asphalt?
Usually with maintenance, you can get about 15 years for that. Before you need to do another maintenance, routine to that.
All right, and what are the engineering concerns for removing the mid-block crossings? Have there been traffic incidents there?
Some of it was related a little bit more to just kind of where the uses are. For instance, we have a crossing right now that's at it's basically at the Dapco driveway. That was put in as part of the Safe Routes to School project back in 2015 or 14. We've since added the additional crosswalk a little bit to the east that has a rapid flashing beacon. So really kind of just defining single points of crossing. So we have that same level of service with the rapid flashing beacon at those safe crossing points. And then some of it's also related to the Avalon project that was constructed recently, just to make sure that we can provide safe crossing points along the NOA.
Either for staff or for OHM, what controls do we have in place so that we don't spend that 70,000? Our project on Second Street, we at the end of the day had an extra $90,000. What checks do we have?
Yeah, so we have worked with OHM and talked through internal process improvements, especially on OHM's part, to make sure that we're getting more regular updates with regard to project status compared to budget, and going and getting either weekly or bi-weekly reports on this is the work that's been completed. This is how much quantities have been allocated for. Here's where we are and as far as the budget.
And we'll basically be doing weekly downloads of quantities. This project will move a little quicker. This will be managed very much like Third Rod was managed, where we basically have those quantities at the end of every week, so we can know pretty well if we're tracking above or below on the as-bid items.
And who signs off when we have to, if we have to go into contingency?
If, I would like to be. And believe me, my goal is not to spend that contingency.
And we're not gonna get any chicane sidewalks with this project, are we?
No.
Okay,
No, there will be, we are adding a sidewalk, I believe, across the MC3 property. It'll be basically right on the right of way line.
okay, but it's not gonna be Woodward like the one on Second.
No, it would be
It's true.
Okay,
right,
'cause
right down the road.
whenever I'm walking with my dog, and my wife, on Central the Second, she always asks me what the heck happened here. I'm like. So I think we're done chicanes for sidewalks.
Just out of curiosity, where is that? Which spot?
Right across from the laundromat, it does that within about 20 feet.
Okay.
I'm all good, thank you.
Yeah, Andrew, Hannah?
Patrick, did you guys see any or have any concerns with the shape of the asphalt right now on Dan Moy Road? And maybe do some additional cores, or do you know what the base is like? Have we done enough homework on all that we're not gonna end up with any surprises on this project?
So I think we have a fairly good idea. We did core, I believe, multiple spots on Dan Hoy, and I think it's typically at least 6 or 7 inches. Sound right?
Yep.
And so we know that, at least the western portion, the schools completed their project, I think 2017 or 18. Everything west of that was done, in the 80s, and we found it was pretty consistent in there. And then on the east side, similarly, it was, I think, closer, kind of late 90s construction. So we have some just firsthand experience with building that. So I think we have a pretty good feel of the cores. And what we're doing, I think we're doing a fairly light mill and then the overlay on top of it. So we don't expect, like, for instance, there was a project a couple of years ago where we milled down and went right to the aggregate. I don't really feel like we're gonna have that issue here because we do have the cores to show that now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jamie?
Since we're kind of on the topic in that area, I don't think this would be addressed with this project. One part of that sidewalk, because you talked about the crossings and we use that a lot as pedestrians running, biking, whatever. When you are the strip mall that has, like Dexter Orthodontic, I guess I'm looking at what it's labeled, kind of behind the gas station, there's that strip mall there. When you're coming out of that driveway, there's like a single family home there. So you have the sidewalk coming from kind of the west, like from the schools. And it needs the sidewalk from that strip mall, kind of like head on. But if you keep going straight, you're gonna go off the curb. So you have to take a hard 90-degree right to get to the sloped part of the crosswalk that gets you down level, so then you can cross and meet that next sidewalk. I guess it's not a crosswalk, just to go across that driveway. That's just always very awkward when you're approaching it, because you're approaching it up here and then down here, and you have to make this hard left to, if you're in a wheeled vehicle at all, if you have a stroller, if you have a bike, and those of you, if you'd be in a wheelchair. I don't know if there's a way at some point, just to make, well, one, to make note of it, and two, if you'd ever be able to just realign the sidewalk that's coming from the school side, so it can meet that on a curve. I don't know if that's allowed, or if it always has to be these 90-degree turns.
So I know that there were actually, the driveway is pretty steep, on that north side.
Yeah, there's kind of a hill, so maybe it was a slope thing.
Yeah, I don't know if you recall, Stacy, if I think we're reworking some of that sidewalk.
We're planning on doing all of them. Lexington, I'm not entirely sure the area that you're talking.
Yeah, that it's along Dan Hoey. I can send a screenshot and look
Okay.
at it to Justin or something. So it's on Dan Hoey, on like the school side of Dan Hoey, but it's,
The north side.
yeah, when you're right by that strip mall, and you're
Right.
approaching their long driveway coming out, you're trying to continue along Dan Hoey, you have to take a hard right to get to the level.
There's sidewalk that comes from the strip mall out along the west side of the driveway, which complicates the.
Is this what you're talking about, the sidewalk as the landing pad here, the sidewalks up here?
Yeah, are you zoomed in on that, the driveway?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's the
Right.
westernmost driveway to the Commerce Center.
Yeah. Even if you just made that curve go away, when the sidewalk comes out, even if you just leveled that, so people had an opportunity to like get flat within their driveway. And then make their way over, just something is difficult there, but I do think there is some sort of a slope there.
We can, I guess we can look at that a little closer, and that's even something where, you know, if it is, if we want to consider adding, we could basically price it out based on the Cadillac bid and then bring it back to council for consideration.
That'd be great. That's what I think we should do.
Okay.
The other thing to note too is, on Dexter and Arbor Road, we are looking at doing a fog seal, leading up to the entrance to the Dexter Crossing neighborhood and restriping that. So that way it didn't strike the way that it used to be. Before the railroad did their project to give more time to get into the left-hand turn lane, to make the left into Dexter Crossing.
That's a different project, all right?
It's the same project,
For this one?
yeah,
Cause they made too much solid, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I believe we have a motion by staff, second by Aldag. We shall vote to approve the resurfacing bid from Cadillac Asphalt, not to exceed 844,250.
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Michaels,
No,
Griffin,
Yes.
Alday,
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yes.
Keo.
Yeah. Motion carries. Number one, 5, consideration of the construction engineering services for the Harbor project from Ocean Advisors for an amount not to exceed 113,400. Construction phase services, right, all of it, correct. Engineering, observation, surveying.
I'll move to approve the proposal from OHM Advisors for construction engineering services for the Holy Road resurfacing and other concrete work for an amount not to exceed $113,400.
Motion by Griffin, thank you. Second by Alden, thank you. Any discussion needed? Okay. Seeing none, please call the vote to approve the engineering contract.
Michaels,
no,
Alday,
Yes,
Sunny Pharaoh,
Yes.
Schlaf,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Keo.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We are over to page 4 of the agenda. Background and non-arranged participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak under this part of the agenda? We're the same people online at the start of the meeting, but I'll ask anybody online wish to speak this evening, please raise your hand. You can raise your hand, picture. No participation tonight, so we will do council comments, starting with Zach.
all right, that's why I was doing no quick notes here. Did see the note of the resolution for the field hockey team. There are also a couple of dance teams from Dexter placed in the top 5 of national competition. We can contact them and see if they'd be interested. I'd like to explain my no votes. If it's not obvious, I was in favor of striking in front of the fire station because it gets really difficult to enforce it. And if you don't have something that you're not enforcing, that already exists, people are less likely to follow other places. My no vote against Dan Hoy is I don't want to wait 15 to 20 years to get the super elevation cut out of that. The super elevation on that road, if you look, it's similar to profile on interstate expressways with the slope. So if you're wondering why people are feeling comfortable going in there really fast, it's because it's designed to accommodate really fast traffic. That is all.
Yeah, Jamie?
Yeah, on Wednesday, I joined the Washtenaw County Road Commission chat. They have it available to members of the public. That was a really thing. I know there's been a lot of public feedback about the proposed roundabout at Island Lake, and I almost get the names of these roads confused. Island Lake is actually Dempsey Road. And a couple of things I learned. One, as you probably know, the construction isn't scheduled until 2026, and they are planning several opportunities for public input before then, but they don't have a specific timeline. The one reason I called it, I was really interested in the extent to which they looked into the next intersection up at Island Lake and Dexter Pinckney Road, because I feel like we don't address the benefit that happens there. Any potential fix we make at Dexter Chelsea Road is going to be rendered moot because you're still going to have the bottleneck further up. I found out that they did request monies to address that intersection, maybe through a different funding mechanism, but they didn't receive those funds, and they said they will keep trying to get the money to address that intersection. I would encourage any of you, any members of the public, if they have questions about that roundabout in the meantime, or any other Washington County Road Commission project, to reach out to them in that way. It was very convenient. It was via Zoom. I think it's every Wednesday. Thought it was really nice. I still do have concerns about that roundabout, given there won't be work done at that other intersection. To me, that seems like the priority, but it sounds like that is on their list. So I wanted to share those with you all.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna coordinate them at the same time. The work to be done.
Yeah, it sounds like they don't have the funding for that, so maybe that will come in between now and then, but.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I have a comment that I would also appreciate if it can be added to the minutes, and I can send it to you, Justin. In early March, I was asked to consider participating in an endeavor in our community. My intention was to let the planning group bring this forward at their own time. However, I am now receiving questions regarding this endeavor from residents outside of the planning group. And with that, I would like to share this with the council and the public to be transparent about my involvement and activities. This is not an opinion on the endeavor. In early March, I was invited and attended a meeting discussing the Friends of Mill Creek Park Committee formed on February 16, 2023 by council members Michelle Van Griffin to potentially distribute a petition for a ballot question to designate 8140 Main as a park, and with that precluding that site from becoming a fire station. I appreciated that the planning team reached out to me for participation. And as I informed them in a more detailed email, even though I voted for MAP as the location of the new fire station, and I believe in the constitutional right of citizens engaging their government through venues such as petition, I will not participate and support this endeavor based on my own opinion regarding the topic and the language of the petition. If any resident or council member wishes to discuss my opinion on the matter, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Did I hear you say that added in this?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah,
No, thank you.
Joe?
The roundabout issue brought up something separate. Sorry. The sign at Eastridge going into Westridge indicates it's Dexter Pinckney Road. So I guess I would like some clarification on if it's Island Lake Road or if it's Dexter Pinckney Road. Because the roundabout suggests that it's Island Lake Road that's being extended from the intersection near Jimmy's Market there and not Dexter Pinckney. So just based on the roundabout, I mean, it's either Dexter Pinckney or.
It was Dexter Pinckney when you and I moved in and they changed their mind about 10 years ago.
And I'm asking which one it is, because our sign should match, right?
But we'd like to keep the historic old one somewhere in our, they don't go out.
The A while ago, council made an effort to change the speed limit in front of the Dexter Crossing Shopping Center. It is based on the idea that the speed limit jumped from 30 to the 35 to 50, right? 15 miles an hour was a lot. At the time, I would say probably didn't think that was necessary. I mean, there's a long shot there, about 1/10 of a mile where you can see the traffic coming. And really, I think the bigger issue is the traffic coming from the east, because you can't always see it there. But that being said, coming out of Westridge on Eastridge Drive, the speed limit changes immediately after Eastridge from 30 miles an hour before you go under the underpass to 45 miles an hour. So a similar 15 mile per hour increase in the speed. Also, the sight lines are extremely short. When you're sitting in Eastridge and you're looking toward the bridge, because the cars are coming uphill, you have a delay in being able to see them. And I wish I could have a microphone so I could demonstrate to you all the Mustang accelerating that hill before it got to the 45-mile-an-hour sign. Before cars get to that entranceway, they're going 45 miles an hour. And when you meet the bridge, and unless there's traffic there, they're going. And it's a much worse situation than the entrance to Dexter Crossing there. Very similar in terms of the change in speed. I would like to see it posted as a lower amount near the Eastridge entrance, similar to the change that was done on Dexter and Arbor Road, but on that side, and then having the final higher speed limit further down, maybe closer to the highway.
So, the reason that we're able to change the speed, near Dexter Crossing is because we took ownership of that road. We don't own the road, on Island Lake Road, after the viaduct. So that would be either, I mean, the road commission would love to give it to us. And that's a conversation we can have with the viaduct. But, that would be solely up to the road commission to make those speed limit changes at this point.
Then I think we gotta make the same request to the road commission to change the speed limits for the same rationale. That's the request, that's the comment. It is a significantly more dangerous situation than it is that we addressed at the other end of the day. So.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, we have no items under proposed agenda items for future meetings, so I will seek a motion for adjournment at 9:22. Moved by Alden. Second by Schlaf. All in favor, signify by saying aye, please. Aye. Have a great evening, and a great week, everyone.